It's Thursday, September 20th. This is The Drill. All right, thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I am the only person that makes the presumption for the status quo. So cultural cues, and I was thinking about that this morning. What are the cultural cues that affect our society, or examples of it? One of them has to do with property. The left doesn't like property. They don't want people to own property. They don't even want you to own automobiles, things of that nature. In the Soviet Union, the way it was done in they are basically Marxists, and the idea was owning the means of production was out of line. But people could own chattels. You could own television and a toaster and things of that nature. They didn't find that to be particularly bad. But today's socialists in the post-Marxist world want no property at all. And so one of the ways that they do that is through various cultural cues, de-emphasizing property and devaluing property. And devaluing, of course, what goes along with it, which is privacy. But what you'll frequently hear, usually from a police officer, or a news person, when there's a situation about somebody getting hurt, let's say a purse snatching, and the woman resists, and she ends up getting hurt in the process of getting her purse snatched. And so then the police officer or the news person will say, if somebody tries to get your purse, give it up. It's just property. It's just things. It's just, you can always replace those items. And it's bullshit. And I'll say it again, it's bullshit. What money represents is time, fundamentally. When you go out and you buy something, for instance, I went out and I got a pair of Bose headphones. Cost me $250. So they're good headphones made of all plastic, which is again, a rant or a monologue for another time. But the point is, it was $250. Now, I was at the time employed with somebody else. I'm currently self-employed, but I was employed with somebody else. That $250 represented, let's pretend I'm getting $25 an hour. It represented 10 hours worth of work. It not only represented 10 hours worth of work, it also represented the psychological and physical stresses that I was under in those 10 hours worth of work. So it represents time, and that was 10 hours. If the item gets stolen, which it hasn't, but if it got stolen, that represents 10 hours of my life I will never, ever get back. Okay? So that's the way it is with all property. Whatever it is you own, automobile down to the smallest trinket, it all represents you have spent money for it. Even if you stole it, even if you, the person that robs you for it, and then they get robbed themselves, they are now out something of value because it cost them the risk that they had to take and the time and the energy they had to expend to take it from you. So, I mean, it's another good reason to resist is because you want to rob me of my time, I'm going to make you earn it. So every time you look at this piece of property, you're going to be reminded of the effort that you had to expend in order to get it, kind of thing. But that's the issue is, again, it's an anti-property move. It's not a public safety issue. It's simply a socialist cultural cue, and it should be ignored. Each individual must decide for him or herself what's worth fighting over. If somebody wants a penny from me, am I going to put up a struggle over it? Probably not. If somebody wants $100 from me, then the more value we're talking about, intrinsic or otherwise, the more likely it is that I'm going to put up some sort of a struggle. So, but again, it's up to each individual, because all of this property, again, represents people's time, and it is time that they will never, ever get back. Now, you might wonder, okay, why would it be a socialist queue? And the way you can tell is because nobody is offering reparations. If the police department said to me, hey, Ron, somebody stole something from you, okay, don't worry about it, because the police department is going to go ahead and we're going to get with the other officers, pool our resources, and we're going to reimburse you for the amount you spent for these, let's say it's the headphones, plus interest. And then say, don't worry about it, it's only money, fine. I can live with that. Okay, because I'm being reimbursed I'm being adequately reimbursed, or as adequately as we can make it. Nobody can give me my time back, but that would be an adequate reimbursement, the cost of the item plus interest. But they don't do that. The state doesn't do that, although the state does have some kind of a victims fund or some such nonsense. But the left doesn't ever come to you and say, don't worry about it because we'll pay for it. Okay, because they want to de-emphasize property entirely. They want you to cop the attitude that, hey, it doesn't really matter. It's only material goods. I can always replace it. They want you to ignore the fact that, no, you can't, because nothing is going to make up for, nothing is going to give you back the time that you spent getting this particular item. So, when I come back, today's episode, we're going to, I'm going to be looking and reading and commenting on Rush Limbaugh, the Rush Limbaugh show from yesterday via his app, his Rush Limbaugh show I guess it's .com, but his application that I have on my phone. It's going to be about the Kavanaugh hearings, and then after that, I'm going to go right back to the book that I was reading from yesterday, which is the 10 books that screwed up the world and 5 that didn't help. So, again, when we get back, Rush Limbaugh. And thank you very much. Welcome back. And from the Rush Limbaugh show, the Kavanaugh accusation is a setup. Rush, all right, it's obvious to me, but I guess not a whole lot of people can say it. But this is a setup. It's a thorough, entire setup. It's got to be a setup, and the Senate ought to deal with it as though it's a setup. If she doesn't show up, then go ahead with the vote. And now the accuser is saying she can't show up. She won't show up until the FBI investigates. Ladies and gentlemen, the whole business of the FBI investigating something that's 36 years old is dubious at best. But beyond that, accusers don't get to set the date of investigations. Accusers don't get to set the terms of the investigation unless they happen to be Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was able to tell Comey when she would and wouldn't sit for an interview from which she was going to be exonerated anyway in her whole email situation. But it's abundantly obvious what's going on here. Let me ask you a question. Let me put it to you this way. What would happen, let's say, I don't know, in the last 10 years up to last week, if any woman had walked into an FBI country office, and I'm going to skip the rest of it because it's really irrelevant. He's belaboring the point. The whole thing with the Senate right now is this is, again, an example where the right aids and abets the left. This is a primary demonstration that the left has nothing. The left has no power. The only thing the left has got on its side is these cheap little psychologistic tricks, and the only way they can get away with it is if the right allows them to, and that's what the Senate is doing now. Okay, the Senate knows, everybody on the Senate, they're all lawyers, and they all know that the presumption is always made for the status quo, that you only change when there is a prima facie case for change. We assume people are innocent until proven guilty. Okay, so that they also know that in this particular case, the accuser has made an arbitrary claim. Other than her testimony, she offers absolutely no evidence, no proof, nothing. Plus the fact that it's 36 years old, so it's beyond the statute of limitations. what this is fundamentally, and this is what Rush Limbaugh misses, Sean Hannity, everybody misses. This is not an attack on the Republican Party. What this is an attack on metaphysical reality. It's not an attack on the Republican Party. It's not an attack on the Supreme Court or on the process of selecting a nominee or a particular nominee or Donald Trump. It's not a political act at all. It is an act or an attack on metaphysical reality. And the stakes are enormous, because if they can get away with this and continue getting away with this, then we get to a point where enough people pretend that metaphysical reality doesn't exist, then anything goes, including socialism. Remember, with Venezuela, the people that were Venezuelans that watched everything develop in Venezuela, when they were asked, how did this happen? They said that the socialists started by undermining Venezuelan culture. Okay, so, and in order to do that, again, they have to undermine reality itself, and that's exactly what they're attempting to do here. And because one of the rules of metaphysical reality is you cannot prove a negative. But that's what they're trying to do. They want to put the Republicans in a position where they attempt to prove a negative. It can't be done. They shouldn't try. What the Senate needs to do, instead of saying, well, we're scared to death of the left. Gee, this is terrifying because they might paint us out to be women haters in the election coming up. So we'll go ahead and agree to hear from this lady, even though she's got nothing to say, nothing to testify about, no evidence, no nothing. We'll go ahead and we'll put off the nomination of Mr. Kavanaugh until at least Monday and give her the opportunity to speak. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. What they should be doing is standing up for, if not their political values, if they don't have the courage, the cojones to stand up for their political values, stand up for the ultimate value, reality, metaphysical damn reality, and come out and say it is impossible to prove a negative, it is impossible for Kavanaugh to prove a negative, it is impossible for us to prove a negative, and we're not going to try. Unless this lady comes up with some evidence or proof to substantiate her claim within, say, 24 hours, we are going to move on and continue with the nomination process as scheduled and stick to it. What conservatives need to know in this country is that it's the easiest thing in the world to defeat the left. It's easy. All you have to do is stand your ground. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay, and that's what the Senate needs to do here. Rush Limbaugh doesn't quite get that. He thinks this whole thing is some kind of a cheap political stunt. There's much more at stake than that. Because, again, if the left can succeed at undermining and subverting metaphysical reality itself, then anything goes. Terrifying prospect. Okay, when I come back, we're going to be reading from the 10 books that screwed up the world. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back. So we were, when I was reading it yesterday, the 10 books screwed up the world, the book we were on was The Prince by Machiavelli. So we'll pick up they were talking about that Machiavelli was very cynical, and he advised princes to only pretend to be good. Use goodness as a shield, to keep people off balance. Pretend to be good because you need to do that in order to get into power and stay in power. But only be good if it advances your agenda. And if necessary, be prepared to be bad, cruel, or even evil. So, to the book. Well, says Machiavelli, let's see what actually happens in the real world. We see, quote, by experience in our times that the princes who have done great things are those who have taken little account of faith, unquote. Keeping your word is foolish if it brings you harm. Now, quote, if all men were good, this teaching would not be good. But because they are wicked and do not observe faith with you, you also do not have to observe it with them, unquote. But keeping one's word is not the only thing that should be cast aside for convenience. The whole idea of being good, Machiavelli assumes, is rather naive. A successful prince must concentrate not on being good, but on appearing to be good. As we all know, appearances can be deceiving, and for a prince, deception is a good thing, an art to be perfected. A prince must therefore be, quote, a great pretender and dissembler, unquote. And so one might ask, should a ruler be merciful, faithful, humane, honest, and religious? Not at all. It is, quote, not necessary for a prince to have all the above-mentioned qualities, but it is indeed necessary to appear to have them. Nay, I dare say this, that by having them and always observing them, they are harmful, and by appearing to have them, they are useful, unquote. So it is much better, more wise, quote, to appear merciful, faithful, humane, honest, and religious, unquote. But if you need to be cruel, faithless, inhumane, dishonest, and sacrilegious, well, then necessity is the mother of invention, and you should invent devious ways to do whatever evil is necessary while appearing good. Let me offer two examples of Machiavelli's advice in action, the first taken from The Prince, and the other from our own day. A more wicked man than Caesar Borgia, whom Machiavelli knew personally, could hardly be imagined. He had been named a cardinal in the Catholic Church, but resigned so he could pursue political glory, and did so in the most ruthless way. Borgia was a man without conscience. He had no anxiety whatsoever about inflicting great cruelties to secure and maintain power. Of course, this gave him a bad reputation with his conquered subjects, creating the kind of bitterness that soon leads to rebellion. In Chapter 7, Machiavelli sets before his reader an interesting practical lesson on Borgia's method of dealing with this problem. One of the areas Borgia snatched up was Romagna, which Machiavelli notes was a province quite full of robberies, quarrels, and every other kind of insolence, unquote. Of course, Borgia wanted, quote, to reduce it to peace and obedience, unquote, because it is hard to rule the unruly. But if he brought them into line himself, the people would hate him, and hatred breeds rebellion. What did Borgia do? He sent in a henchman, Ramiro de Orco, quote, a cruel and ready man to whom he gave the fullest power, unquote. Ramiro did the dirty work, but of course this got him dirty. The people hated Ramiro for his attempts to crush the rebellious and lawless spirit and make them obedient subjects. But as Ramiro was obviously working as Borgia's lieutenant, Borgia would be hated too. But Borgia was an inventive man. He knew that he needed to fool the people into believing that, quote, if any cruelty had been committed, this had not come from him, but from the harsh nature of his minister, unquote. And so, Borgia had Ramiro, quote, placed one morning in the piazza at Cesena, cut in two pieces, with a piece of wood and a bloody knife beside him. The ferocity of this spectacle left the people at once satisfied and stupefied, unquote. Satisfied and stupefied, the angry people of Romagna were happy to see the agent of Borgia's cruelty suddenly appear one sunny morning, hewn in half in the town square. Borgia himself had satisfied their desire for revenge, but at the same time they were numbed into obedience by a completely unexpected spectacle of ingenious brutality. The reader's imagination gropes after an image of the horror. A man sawed in half, lengthwise or crosswise. A bloody knife, simply lying beside the body, thrust into the block of wood. Could a mere knife hack a man in two? And why a block of wood? A butcher's block? One thing is certain, Machiavelli does not blame Borgia for his ingenious cruelty, but praises him. He very cleverly appeared to be humane by hiding inhumanity, to be merciful by concealing mercilessness. Quote, I would not know how to reproach him, unquote, Machiavelli says of Borgia's lifelong career of similarly dastardly actions. Quote, on the contrary, it seems to me he should be put forward, as I have done, to be imitated by all those who have risen to empire through fortune, unquote. One does not always need to be as viciously picturesque as Borgia to follow Machiavelli's advice. Anyone who watches our own political scene well knows we quite often witness the less bloody, but no less well calculated, spectacle of an underling to a president or congressman immolating himself publicly to take the heat off his boss. Behind the elaborately staged appearances, the underling, like poor Ramiro, who was merely carrying out the chief's orders, let me see here, is being sacrificed to satisfy and stupefy the electorate. This brings us to our second example of Machiavellism in action. A prince should thus take care, notes Machiavelli, returning to his list of virtues, quote, that nothing escape his mouth that is not full of the above-mentioned 5 qualities, unquote, so that, quote, he should appear all mercy, all faith, all honesty, all humanity, all religion, and nothing is more necessary to appear to have than this last quality, unquote. It is the most important that rulers, and even more so would-be rulers, appear to be religious. Quote, everyone sees how you appear, unquote, but, quote, few touch what you are, unquote. And appearing to be religious assures those who see you that because you appear to believe in God, you can be trusted to have all the other virtues. In politics, some things never change. So again, the ends, basically sum it up, it's the ends justify the means, and might makes right. If I can do something, I should do it. If I can get away with it, I'll do it. I'll do whatever it is that I think I can get away with. And we have that cultural example in our own, that I want to use in our own country in modern times, is the police department. We all know, at least all adults, that police officers lie. They lie every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Why? They do so because they believe, or at least pretend, that the ends justify the means. An example is, there was a show on, I believe it was Cops, the television show Cops, where the episode was about a man who had escaped from prison. And an officer was being interviewed that had encountered this prisoner. He didn't know what the prisoner looked like. He knew that one had escaped. So he encounters this individual, stops him, and asks the individual his name. Right? So he says, I'm going to call on the radio and see whether or not you have any wants or warrants. So he gets on the radio, or pretends to get on the radio, comes back to the guy and says, bad news, you got some warrants. But the guy knew that police officers lie. And the officer himself told the interviewer, I lied. I told this guy he had warrants when I knew he didn't, because I wanted to see if he would run. I wanted to see if he was going to act guilty and run. The guy kept his cool, kind of shrugged his shoulders, and the police officer let him go. Now, turned out that he let go a wanted, escaped felon. So it was kind of ironic, the whole situation. But the point is that the officer admitted to lying. He lied to this man, and they will lie to anybody. Another example of that is the O.J. Simpson trial. You had a detective, an LAPD detective, on the stand. Well, he was convicted of perjury. I think he pleaded no contest, but he's convicted of perjury, and it's a detective, Mark Furman. He's a convicted perjurer. And why? Because might makes right, and the ends justify the means. Whatever it takes to secure the conviction. It was a stupid lie, And if he hadn't lied, if he'd simply been honest, there's a very good possibility that O.J. Simpson would have been found guilty. Because once he lies about the small things, about, in this case, using the N-word, then he can be assumed to be lying about all of the things he testified about whether or not he hates black people, about whether or not he hates interracial couples, about whether or not he planted evidence. Okay, so that's why the jury was well within their rights to find O.J. Simpson not guilty. They were absolutely correct to do so. And the people that are mad at the jury members are stupid. Okay, there's two people to be mad at here. One of them is Mark Furman. The other one is the prosecutor, Marcia Clark. Marcia Clark probably more than Mark Furman, because she was the one that was running the prosecution. She obviously did not prepare her witness. She did not sit down with him and go over this. She should have anticipated this coming up and should have instructed him that even if he's never used the N-word in his life, he is to answer, yes, I did. Because that would have been the more credible answer. Actually, it probably would have been a lie, but the point is, prep him better. She obviously didn't do that. He got on the stand, he lied, and he tore apart her case in so doing. Also, then, she did not obviously check whether or not the bloody gloves fit. Okay? And and they didn't, and that led to the spectacle in the court of O.J. Simpson trying to squeeze on a glove that obviously didn't fit. And if she had gone ahead and, again, done a little bit more preparation, she could have avoided that embarrassment. And again, very possibly, maybe the outcome would have been different. Okay? So, but again, the point is, those are examples, real-life examples of Machiavelli attitude. The ends justify the means. I will do whatever I think I can get away with. It's wrong. It was wrong back in the 1400s. It's wrong today. Universal wrong. It's wrong back in the 1400s, 600, 700 years ago. It's wrong today. It'll be wrong 700 years from now. It is wrong for me. It's wrong for you. It is wrong for every human being on this planet, no matter where they are. For everybody, all the time. So one of the other things the left denies is the existence of universal rights and wrongs. So, and when I come back, I'm going to go ahead and read another joke or two from the New York City cab drivers joke book. Okay, thank you very much. And let's see, a 10-year-old boy goes into a house of ill repute. He goes up to the madam and says, I want to buy a woman. The madam says, get out of here, you're too young. The kid reaches into his pocket and pulls out a huge wad of money. Well, says the madam, looking at the bills, we might be able to work something out. What exactly did you have in mind? The little boy says, I want a woman who has syphilis. Are you kidding me, says the woman. Nope, says the kid, I want a woman who has syphilis. Okay, it's up to you, says the madam, picking up the telephone. She calls the worst place in town. They send a woman over. The boy goes upstairs with the woman, has sex, and comes down and pays the bill. Thank you, he says, and starts to walk out. Wait a minute, says the madam. Come here. So the kid walks over to her. Yes, he says. I can understand you wanting to come in here, she says, but I don't understand why you wanted a woman who has syphilis. Can you explain that to me? Sure, says the kid. That means I got syphilis, right? She says, yeah. And that means when I go home and get the maid tonight, that means she'll have syphilis too, right? Right, says the madam. Then when the butler gets the maid, he'll get syphilis, right? Right, says the madam. Then when the butler gets mommy, she'll have syphilis, right? Right, says the madam. Then when mommy gets daddy, he'll have syphilis, right? Right, she says. When daddy gets the gardener's wife, she'll get syphilis, right? Right, says the curious madam. Then when the gardener's wife gets the gardener, He'll have syphilis, right? Right, says the madam. Well, that's the jerk who killed my turtle. And on that note, we come to the end of another episode of The Drill. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.